Welcome back to another installment of High Five. I hope everyone is having a great week. I, as always, am your host, the one, the only, the second Irish Bandit. We are officially into October, which is one of my favorite times. Well, for the first 13 days of October, then there's a stretch about a week that is really not so great. But then everything after the 20th is fine and dandy because we have Halloween coming up. Halloween, one of my favorite times of the year. As you know, I'm a huge horror movie buff. And today on High Five, we are going to be talking about 5 quintessential horror movies that you need to watch. Whether you're just getting into the horror genre or you're a massive horror movie junkie, these are 5 movies that you definitely need to watch before you can consider yourself a horror movie expert. These are 5 movies that are in my collection that I absolutely adore. These are some of the greatest horror movies ever made. Let's start it off with the one that really kicked it off for me. That was my introduction into horror movies. It's a movie that I wanted to own for the longest time because I absolutely loved it. And last year I finally got myself a copy of it. And it's in a really cool package too. I'm sorry for the extreme close-up, guys. It's a really cool package too. It glows in the dark. You know, when you see this man's face, you know what movie I'm talking about. I am talking about one of the greatest horror movies ever made, one of the greatest vampire movies ever made. He's the king of the vampires. He's the best. He's Dracula. Dracula was released in 1931 and stars a stellar cast including Bela Lugosi in his star-making role as Count Dracula. You have Edward von Sloan as Dr. Van Helsing, and Dwight Frye as Renfield, Dracula's assistant or hanger-on. Dwight Frye just totally makes this movie. I think it's one of his best performances. You know, he's rats. I love Dwight Frye in this and in Frankenstein. He was absolutely fantastic in both as Dr. Frankenstein's assistant, Fritz. Yeah, that's the thing. You know, everybody, the hunchback assistant named Igor. No, his name wasn't Igor in the original Frankenstein movie. It was Fritz. But we're not talking about Frankenstein again. That's another great movie you should watch as well, along with Dracula. Do it as a double feature: Dracula, Frankenstein. Great movies. I love them both. But we're talking about Dracula here. Dracula is based on the book of the same name by Bram Stoker. There are some liberties taken with this movie as compared to the book. You see that later on in the remake of Dracula from 1992 starring Gary Oldman. Another great movie that I highly suggest if you're getting into the horror genre. But Dracula is an outstanding movie. The atmosphere is just spooky and wonderful with the black and white. There's no music throughout. There's some music at the very beginning, and then just the rest is just silent because this was one of the first movies coming out of the silent era of movies. And quick little fun fact, the Man of a Thousand Faces, Lon Chaney Sr., was supposed to play Dracula. Unfortunately, he passed away before filming could begin, which is why Bela Lugosi got the starring role as Dracula. Another fun fact about Dracula, Bela Lugosi could not speak a word of English, so his script was phonetically spelled out, and he was just going by what the script said, and he had no knowledge of the English language. So he eventually did learn a little more English as time went on. But this is a fantastic movie. It is, if you're just getting into the horror genre, it's one that I suggest you watch first. Horror is something you shouldn't dive into feet first. You shouldn't just start out with something like one of the Saw movies or Hostel. Definitely go back, acquaint yourself with the history of horror movies and the Universal monster movies like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Wolfman. Any one of those are great starting off points for you. And then just work your way up. This is what this episode is going to be about. You just work yourself through the entire history of horror, because the next movie on my list is a quintessential movie. Before this one, all zombie movies were pretty much the same. It was somebody with voodoo powers controlling people as their unwilling zombies. But this, through the visionary work of George Romero, made zombies what they are today. Undead flesh eaters. And this is a fantastic movie. I'm a huge horror movie junkie, of course, but I'm not a huge zombie fan. Well, I love The Walking Dead, but this movie is one of my favorites. It is a fantastic movie, and it is called Night of the Living Dead. Released in 1968, Night of the Living Dead saw a huge shift in the zombie genre because before that, in like a movie like White Zombie, where again starred Bela Lugosi, all zombie movies were the same. They were just mindless, mindless drones who were controlled by voodoo to do whoever's bidding. Like in White Zombie, to do the character that Bela Lugosi played, to do his because he plays a Haitian plantation worker and has all these zombies working for him on his plantation. This was a seismic shift in what zombies were because now they're rising from the grave and eating people. Night of the Living Dead was one of the first movies to get an R rating. And, looking back at 1968, yeah, it was well deserved. It was graphic for the time. Looking at it now in 2017, it's kind of tame, but it's a very well done movie. George Romero, rest in peace. George Romero does a fantastic job setting the atmosphere, and just everything in the movie is just paced so well. And it's one of the first movies where it broke that color barrier because you have an African American man in essentially the lead role of the movie. Many years later, Night of the Living Dead would be remade, this time directed by horror effects master Tom Savini, and starring Patricia Tallman in the role of Beverly. Oh, no, Barbara, sorry. One of my favorite lines in Night of the Living Dead is like right at the very beginning when Barbara and her brother are laying flowers at, I think, their father's grave. And here comes one of the zombies, and her brother goes, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." He just delivers it so well with such, assholeness in his voice. It's fantastic. But in the difference between the original and the remake, Barbara is a lot more timid in the original, whereas being portrayed by Patricia Tallman from the Babylon 5 series, she just becomes this ass kicker in the movie. It's on Netflix now. I'm going to watch it very, very soon. So I'll let you know about it. Maybe I'll do a review of it, comparing the original to the remake. But the original is just a masterpiece in every sense of the word, and it's definitely one you should watch. So we're skipping ahead 10 years to the 1970s. I think it was 1978. I could be off on that. But this movie was really one of the kickoff points for the whole slasher subgenre of horror movies. This is a fantastic movie. Very little blood, but still a fantastic movie directed by John Carpenter. I think it's one of the greatest horror movies ever made. Like, you know me, I love Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, movies like that. I think this one outranks them all. It's one of the best slasher movies ever made. It's Halloween. So I was right, 1978 was when Halloween came out. Halloween is just a fantastic movie. Again, John Carpenter directed and produced it, and he even wrote the iconic theme for it. The do 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 do. It introduced the world to Michael Myers, and it also introduced the world to Jamie Lee Curtis, who was in her first starring role. She became one of the biggest scream queens in the 1980s, leading up to her mainstream film debut. I guess you'd call it Trading Places. Another great movie, but we're not talking about horror movies. No, we're talking about horror movies. We're not talking about comedies. Oh, I'm so confused. Anyway, yes, Halloween is such a great movie. It centers on Laurie Strode, who is a babysitter who is being stalked by a mysterious figure in a Captain Kirk mask. Yeah, the iconic mask used for Michael Myers is that of a Captain Kirk mask of, William Shatner. I think that really helped the movie a lot. You had this figure, didn't say a word, it was completely masked. There was one point in the original movie where you saw his face, but that was for like 10 seconds and he pulls the mask back down. This movie was well cast. Like I said, you have Jamie Lee Curtis and you have Donald Pleasance as Dr. Sam Loomis. Little nod on the Sam Loomis character from the movie Psycho. And then years later, in another movie we're talking about, a character by the name of Billy Loomis. I would imagine it was named after Sam Loomis. But this is this is probably my favorite slasher. Like, before this one, I did see Nightmare on Elm Street, and then Friday the 13th, and then Halloween. And I think Halloween is the best one of the slasher genre. There's very little blood in this. You know, for being a slasher movie, there's very little blood. There's more blood in the sequel, which I absolutely love as well. Halloween would have countless sequels, including the ill-fated Halloween 3, which didn't feature Michael Myers at all. He didn't return until Halloween 4, and then you had two remakes. Remake of the original, directed by Rob Zombie. And now there's going to be another Halloween movie with Jamie Lee Curtis returning as Laurie Strode. I cannot wait to watch that. You know I'm going to tell you all about it when I see it. But Halloween, the original one, is a fantastic movie. Again, I don't think it's one you should jump into right away. Like, watch a few more movies before that. But if you're well versed in the horror genre, definitely give it a watch. This next one took the slasher genre, turned it on its head with an imaginative tale. Before this movie came out, you had Michael Myers, who didn't say anything, and who you could really escape if you had a good pair of shoes on. This killer stalked your dreams and made a quip or a one-liner anytime he went to kill you. You know I can only be talking about one person. That's the iconic Freddy Krueger. This movie, again, another one of my favorites, of my favorite series, one of my favorite movies. I absolutely love A Nightmare on Elm Street. So yeah, just to show you how big of a fan I am of the movie, I have two different copies of the movie. I have the digitally remastered version, the first DVD release of it, and I got the second DVD release of it, which was the Infinifilm series. And this one is signed by Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, but I'm sure you've seen that if you've seen my Saskatoon Expo videos. So yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street was released in 1984, directed by the late, great Wes Craven, and has such an amazing cast, including Robert Englund. It has, I just spaced on her, Heather Langenkamp as the role of Nancy, and it introduced the world to Johnny Depp in his very first film role. This is, of course, before Johnny Depp needed introducing. It introduced the world to the iconic villain Freddy Krueger, the man of your dreams, who could really, Robert Englund was such a scene stealer in these movies. He, have a quick quip before he killed you. It's like I said, you had the villains like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, a mask covering their face. They didn't say anything. Freddy Krueger, welcome to prime time, bitch, from Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Yeah, I could just quote any one of these movies. I can tell you what they're from. But Freddy Krueger is such an iconic villain. He's up there with the likes of Darth Vader. He's one of the villains that you grow to like, which is really weird if you think about it, because the whole backstory of Freddy Krueger was he was a child murderer before he was entering teenagers' dreams and killing them. So it's really weird that we iconolize, I don't even know if that's a word, that we put a child killer on such a pedestal, but Robert Englund just does an amazing job of it. The Nightmare on Elm Street led to many sequels afterwards. One of my favorites being A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors. I guess it's just Dream Warriors. Fourth was Dream Master. The series itself was, it had its peaks and its valleys. Like, it started out great with Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I think, is one you can really... It's one that I watch and I grow more appreciation to every time that I watch it. It just gets better. Because at first, I didn't really think much of it, but then the more I watched it, the more I liked it. Then you have Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which is my personal favorite of the sequels. Nightmare on Elm Street 4 was good. I thought Nightmare on Elm Street 5 had a very imaginative story with Freddy invading the dreams of Alice's unborn child. I thought 6 was such a letdown. Freddy's dead. They could have done something better with it. Great cast though. You know, you had Leslie Dean. You had Breckin Meyer in one of his first roles. Ricky Dean Logan as the three main kids in this movie. You had, of course, Robert Englund returning as Freddy Krueger. Such a great movie. And then you had New Nightmare after that, which was such an imaginative movie and such a shift from the 6 previous movies. It's one that I absolutely adore because Robert Englund, of course, he's doing the dual role as himself and as Freddy Krueger. But the direction of Wes Craven was just phenomenal in this movie. Then you had Freddy versus Jason. You had horror icon versus horror icon battling head to head. Good movie, not one of my favorites. It could have been done better. And then you had the remake, which we won't get into. I will say this. I like the remake. I didn't love it. It could and should have been better. If you didn't like the movie, I totally understand why, and I'm not going to try to make you like it. If you hated it, hey, you hated it. There's nothing I can say to get you to change your mind, and I don't want to change your mind if you hate it, because I understand why you hated it. But Nightmare on Elm Street is just a fantastic movie, and if you're getting into the slasher genre, it's one I definitely recommend. This final movie on the list was one of the best movies made by Wes Craven. He really put his heart and soul into this one. Heart. And he actually intended this to be just like a kind of a parody of the slasher genre. And it did so well. It spawned 3 different sequels and made stars of its young, hip cast. I love this movie. Is it overrated? I'll let you be the judge of that one. Another one you should definitely watch, Scream. Released in 1996, like I said, Wes Craven meant this to be a parody of the slasher genre because he just wanted it to end. And Scream became such a success that it spawned 3 other sequels. This has just one of the best casts I've ever seen in Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, who are the three main characters who are through all 4 movies. Then you have Jamie Kennedy, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich. That's just in the first movie. Timothy Olyphant, Jerry O'Connell in the second movie. Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps as well. Third movie, you have Scott Foley. You have Patrick Dempsey in the third movie. In the fourth, you have Eric Knudsen. You have Rory Culkin. Yeah, that's him. And the chick from Heroes, Hayden something or other. I can never pronounce her last name. I really thought that the first movie was something special when I first watched it. Then the second movie, I think, totally topped it. The first movie has such a great premise to it. It's, will do movies make people more psycho? And I think the best answer you can get from that came from Skeet Ulrich's character of Billy Loomis. Going back to Halloween there. Billy Loomis when he said, "Now Sid, don't you blame the movies. Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative." So yeah, I think it's unfair to blame movies. But, this did have some controversy around it because there was some murders that happened after the movie was released. So, kind of a gray area there. I thought Scream 2 was absolutely fantastic. I thought Scream 3 was a big step down. I had certain expectations going in and they weren't met. And then years later when it was announced that Scream 4 was going to happen, which was Wes Craven's final movie he directed before he passed away. When Scream 4 was announced, again, I had such high hopes and I was so let down by that movie. But again, Scream 4 is another one that I watch and I grow more appreciation to every time I watch it. It's good. It's not great. It doesn't compare to the original, but it's good. It's watchable at least, and it's a fun movie. And it's great to see the characters of Sidney, Dewey, and Gale all back together again. I was really disappointed with the events in number 2 when Randy passed away. Spoiler alert. But if you haven't seen Scream 2 by now, you better go watch it. It's over 10 years old. But I was really disappointed by that because I thought Randy was just a fantastic character in the first movie. And to see him taken out like that was kind of disheartening. But Scream itself, the first movie, was fantastic. Overall, the series was good. Of course, again, like Nightmare on Elm Street had its ups and downs. It also spawned a TV series, which I felt was pretty good. I felt that the TV series, the first 2 seasons of it, were the sequel that I wanted from Scream 4. And we're getting a third season, which is going to be an entirely different story altogether, although they left the Brandon James story unresolved from the first 2 seasons. Come on, finish that, please, before you start any new stories. And everyone was bitching about the design of the mask in the Scream TV series. Well, it wasn't meant to be a continuation of the Scream movies. It was something completely new. So I understand the necessity for a new mask. And now for the third season of Scream, we're going to get the iconic Ghostface mask. Which, okay, I'm fine with that. But again, let's finish the Brandon James storyline, for crying out loud. Like, oh. So I will give the third season of Scream a watch, and I'll give it a chance, and we'll see what happens from there. But yes, the Scream movie series is really good, and especially the first movie, which I absolutely love. Well, there you go. Those are 5 horror movies that you definitely should watch this Halloween season. I hope you enjoyed this episode. What are some of your favorite horror movies? Let me know in the comments section down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the merchandise store to get your Irish Bandit apparel. And I will see you again in 2 weeks for another episode of High Five. We're going to be talking about 5 not so scary movies, but scary enough that you can watch during the Halloween holiday season. Why was that so hard to get out? Anyway, I will see you again in 2 weeks for that episode of High Five. Until then, I'm the Bandit, and this has been High Five.